Okay, this is your final event of the evening, and we are all so privileged to have Douglas Murray. Douglas, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to make this very interesting. If it gets a little slow, we may call Lindsay up. Is Lindsay still here? He's gone to the after party. Yeah, Lindsay's already off to the after party. Douglas, you have been such a voice of moral clarity. There's probably no one who has written as thoughtfully about the origins of anti-Semitism, what's happened over the last several years with the horrible attack on Israel. And you wrote a great book, On Democracies and Death Cults, which is a bestseller. We met last year at this RJC, and a lot has happened since then. Most notably, the ceasefire, the hostages returned. Are we done? Is the war over?
Well, first of all, can I just say what a pleasure it is to be back with you, and what a pleasure it is for me to be back with the RJC. Until Lindsey Graham got up, I didn't realize it was open mic night at the RJC, but clearly it is, and it's a difficult act for us to follow. I've also spent enough time in Israel now. I think have become slightly Jewish. I noticed that on the way in, I kept standing up whilst other people were speaking and going to talk at other tables and things. So I've got to be forgiving to you if you do it as well, but thank you. I said in a recent piece in the Free Press that there are two wars that actually I wrote about in my book and which I've been writing about and considering for the last 2 years. The first war is the war on the ground, the war that Hamas started on October the 7th, the war that the IDF has been fighting for the last 2 years. And that has been, I mean, let's just take a moment again to recognize the achievements. Unimaginable, even from when we were sitting here this time last year. The last time we were all gathered together here in Las Vegas was before the first anniversary of October the 7th. And just consider that what Yahya Sinwar started on the 7th led up till now to the decimation of Hamas in Gaza, the death of Sinwar and all of his colleagues who started this war, the decimation of Hezbollah, the opportunity of the IDF and the IAF to operate everywhere in the region where they needed to operate, and for the IAF and for the American Air Force to be able to fly over the skies of Iran anytime they wanted. This is a generational achievement, and it's down to the political leadership in Israel, the political leadership we've seen here in America, and the extraordinary men and women of the IDF. And that story is one that you will know about. Many people in the wider world don't know enough about yet. But the second war is the war here at home in America, the war in the rest of the West, the war that goes on wherever in the last 2 years I've gone when I haven't been in Israel, whether it's been here in America or back in my country of birth in Great Britain or in France or Canada or Australia. It doesn't matter where in the world you go. You find these lunatics on the streets, not just on the campuses, on the streets of major cities. You can go to Melbourne on a Saturday afternoon and you'll find thousands of Australians chanting their opposition to the state of Israel and their support for various terrorists. And what are you doing? You're in Melbourne. What's it got to do with you? You're miles away. What is it that has gone on outside of the Middle East? My fear is that although Israel's been winning the war in the region, in the rest of the West, particularly here in America, to some extent we've been losing. We've been losing by the fact that we've seen the mainstreaming of support, not for Palestinians or for Palestinian statehood, but for Hamas. Why is it that at Princeton you have a group chanting the other month, "Glory to our martyrs"? Our martyrs. Princeton. What's our doing there? What's martyrs? Since when did students going up to Princeton have the hots for Hamas? When did this start? This is for me the problem we need to address.
You know, I saw this, we all saw it, but I saw this in Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania. I saw it at the University of Pittsburgh, where a kid that had my shirt, you know, McCormick for Senate, and an Israel flag was assaulted. And it was so shocking as a non-Jew after October 7th, knowing anti-Semitism existed, but never imagining the depth and the vitriol. So you've written about this. What's the root cause? Where did we go wrong? How did this happen?
Well, my view has always been that anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism are just the furthest flank of anti-Westernism. This has been mentioned already tonight, but I came up with this formulation a while ago. I think I mentioned this last year. I borrowed from the great Russian Soviet writer Vasily Grossman, where he says in the middle of Life and Fate, "Tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of." It's a brilliant, brilliant observation by him. Where he says, the anti-Semite tells us nothing about the Jews. They just tell us something about themselves. So, you know, the Nazis said that the Jews were racists who wanted to take over the world. You think, interesting. Take any group throughout history, and right up to the present day. Whatever they accuse the Jews of and the Jewish state of is what they're guilty of. The Iranian revolutionary government says that the Jewish state is colonizing. Interesting for the citizens of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza, etc. But in our countries in the West, there's a slight shift on this, which I say, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, if you're like an American student. Tell me what you accuse the Jewish state of in particular, and I'll tell you what you've been taught that you are guilty of. I wrote 2 books back in the War on the West. If you look at the things that young Americans are being taught from grade school upwards, it's not just the universities, it's too easy in a way to focus on that. Just look at what American kids are taught about their own history here in America. It's what Elon Musk some time ago said to Bill Maher is the woke mind virus, which is, he said to a friend's kid, what do you know about Thomas Jefferson? Answer, slave owner. Anything else? No. That's the virus. And that's something that has been inculcated into the minds of young Americans, young Canadians, young Australians, is that they've been taught that even if you're born in the 21st century, you're guilty of white supremacy, you're guilty of colonialism, you're guilty of genocide, you're guilty of ethnic cleansing. And as I said in the War on the West, there's nothing you can do if you've been taught you're guilty of this, because you haven't done anything. All that's happened is you've been told you've got guilt for something you didn't do. And as I said in that book, something will happen as a result of this, because you cannot live with an unalleviatable guilt, something that can never be forgiven. And so how has it exploded in our time? And I'm not talking here about the hardcore Islamists and others who live in our societies, but for what would have been normal kids, it's that for many of them, we shouldn't exaggerate, but for many of them, it's that they have this orgiastic glee in being able to accuse another country now of all the things that they have been taught that they have inherited guilt for. They will expiate their taught guilt by saying the Jewish state is committing genocide, the Jewish state is white supremacist, showing they've never walked down an Israeli street. They will say all of these things about Israel, and it's almost with relief. It's the same thing you hear in Europe. You can hear in Germany, in Austria, where I was last week, the joy that some Europeans have in being able to accuse the Jewish state of genocide. Means we don't have any guilt. Yeah.
So for those of us here in the audience that are in public life, governors or senators, what should we do? what is the way that we address the course correction on the second battle, the second war?
I think there's several things. One is that for Jewish Americans in particular, I say not being Jewish myself, but I can only give a piece of advice on this, is never to tolerate things that other groups wouldn't tolerate. And I grew up in England. The Jewish community is different in England than it is here. And the Jewish community in America has always been much more vocal, much more proud, much more willing to put its head above the parapet and be counted. But still, as I've said for the last couple of years, tell me that if for instance, I live in New York, but if a Columbia University or some other university in New York, once a black student had been chased across campus by a group of actual white supremacists saying, "Go back to where you came from," don't tell me that this country wouldn't have been in uproar. And we would have been rightly in uproar.
Yeah.
And we would have stood beside our black brothers and sisters and said, "We are with you." And if once some sexual minority that had happened to, let alone for 2 years, this would have been wall-to-wall coverage on every network. So why is it that when it's Jewish kids being chased down the streets and insulted and Jewish families being made to feel threatened, people get used to it? And so that's the first thing, is just not putting up with the double standards that many Jews are expected to put up with in America, and thankfully I think people in this room don't. But the second thing is, I think we need to get out this very clear message that, again, as somebody mentioned earlier, they're just always related. The anti-Semitism, the anti-Israelism, and the anti-Westernism. I have a sort of shortcut to this. You just mentioned it there, but go to any anti-Israel protest in this country and go to any pro-Israel protest in this country and notice one glaring difference. The pro-Israel protest will have happy people, by the way, generally, you'll notice, happy people flying the flag of the State of Israel and the flag of this country. Go to an anti-Israel protest and they will be flying the flag of the Palestinians, they will be flying the flag maybe of Hamas or of Hezbollah or the Iranian Revolutionary Government. They will not be flying an American flag. In fact, if there is an American flag there, it's only there so they can put it on the floor and burn it. This tells us quite a lot. We sang tonight, Hatikva and the Star-Spangled Banner. Find me the anti-Israel protest in America where they would sing the national anthem of America. And the same thing goes in every country. Find the anti-Israel protesters in the UK who, after they've screamed jihad, jihad, all get together and sing God Save the King. It doesn't happen. Go to Canada and you find the Hamasniks and the Hezbollah lovers and all the people who worship all these people who are now dead. If they're protesting in Toronto or Ottawa, they never stop at the end and say, "Oh, hey guys, let's all stop and sing Oh Canada." It doesn't happen. And that tells us everything.
Yeah. So let's go back to the first war. So are you optimistic? What does Gaza look like in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Is there another Abraham Accords 2? How do you see the future?
It would be a very unwise person to make a prediction about Gaza, not least because of Ron Dermer and other people being present who know much more. I would just say this. I was enormously encouraged when President Trump broke the Overton window on Gaza, and have been very encouraging of his statements on this. And let me just say quickly why. Until the president earlier this year started, expressing, let's say, innovative new opinions about what could be done with Gaza, there was a status quo opinion which was completely intolerable, which was the presumption, which again, if you go to the chancelleries of Europe, you will still hear, which is, after the war, Gaza must be rebuilt, preferably with our taxpayer money, and a Hamas-like entity will probably end up being in charge, and an UNRWA-like entity will end up running the education system, and we'll all pay our taxpayer dollars to rebuild it, and then they'll probably do another October the 7th, and in about 10 years, the IDF will have to go in and smash it up again. That is a totally nihilistic, impossible, pointless and futile policy, which you will still find policymakers in Paris and London and Berlin talking about. But there's no point to it. Myself, like many of you, in fact all of you I'd have thought, I never want to see another young Israeli have to go into Gaza with a gun. I don't see why this should be Israel's responsibility. And when President Trump said, you know, we'll clear Gaza, or we'll let people leave, or we'll buy Gaza, or we don't have to buy it, we can just take it, or we'll, you know, make it Las Vegas or whatever, I don't care. Any and all ideas that do not involve the perceived status quo just happening again and again, to my mind, are good. And if the Trump plan can come about, if obviously, you know, the Board of Peace has got a bit of fleshing out still to be done, but I'm told that there are lots of people in the region who want to be on it. I'm thrilled that President Trump has said that he will lead it, because it shows his commitment to this,
Absolutely.
his ongoing commitment. And so we'll see. But this should be, among other things, a time for all those other countries in the region which pretend that they care about the Palestinians to show up and take some responsibility. This is their time.
This is the test, yeah. Ron and I were just talking about how only Trump could have brought all these forces together because of those relationships, and they don't want to disappoint him. You know, one of the things, my wife and I have gone to Israel a number of times, but several times in the last 2 years. The thing that always strikes me is when I'm there, the facts on the ground, then I come back to the United States, the narrative is almost entirely different. And most notably on humanitarian aid. So we went and sat down with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We saw the plans, the efforts to make sure that humanitarian assistance was going to women and children in Gaza, the efforts, the danger people put themselves in. And we came back, and that narrative is completely unknown and misrepresented by the media here in the United States. And it raises the question, does Israel have a PR problem? Does it inaccurately tell its story? And I ask you, as one of the great storytellers, someone who really has told the story accurately, but is there an issue there, and what are your reflections on it?
Well, I've sometimes said that Israel is a remarkable country for many reasons, but one is that it has about 8 million potential prime ministers, or would-be prime ministers, which makes it, I admire people in government in Israel for being able to manage that. If that's the case in Israel, however many Jews there are around the world outside of Israel, everybody believes they know how to do Hasbara and moans that the Israelis don't get it, and so on. My view has always been the same, which is I think there are so many talented people who've got the right views, who know what they're talking about, who should just do their own thing. And we've heard from a range of them tonight. You're going to hear from more in the coming days. There is no one answer to the Israel PR problem. But I think there are some things one has to accept from the beginning. One is that numerically in the region, the Israelis are vastly outnumbered. Tiny country, and just compare it to, for instance, Pakistan, which, for all sorts of interesting reasons, produces lots of people who are feverishly online, often pretending to be American Jews, by the way, putting forth their views on X about how this country or Israel should be run. Just vastly outnumbered in those terms. And that means that there are just certain things, again, with certain newspapers, I won't name names, certain media outlets, I won't name names, but that's just going to be an ongoing problem. And the only hope you can have in some ways is that you can keep exposing it, you can keep revealing how some of the media works on this, the lies they tell. And my sense is, by the way, we shouldn't be too down about this. my experience in this conflict is that the Israeli government and the army has been better at getting out information faster than any conflict I've seen before. And yes, there are still, challenges to getting that out, but you've got to face up to the asymmetry which exists and get out there with the optimistic, I think, stance that I've always had, which is it doesn't matter if there are 1,000 lies in the room, one truth will pierce them all. And that, I think we've all seen that in our lives, and it works with the media too, and I think there's no reason it shouldn't work with Israel.
Well, lies in the room brings me to sort of the elephant in the room, which is this very week. This very week you had a avowed anti-Semite, Fuentes, given platform, where this is a guy who says Hitler was cool, has specifically said that Jews should be terminated if, in the next round of white nationalist leadership. And those views went unchallenged, which a number of speakers have talked tonight about this rise of anti-Semitism on the right. What's going on? Is this a little problem, or is this a big problem that's growing?
It's a problem, and if it's not addressed now, it will grow. I would just say to my Republican friends that what was the worst thing that the Democratic Party has done in recent years? Don't shout out. One of them was the tolerance on their own side of slogans like defund the police. A disaster for the Democrats. Moderate Democrats, of which there are some, were so misguided not to hit this on the head when it came up, when the far left lunacy in their party came up. The squad of the Democratic Party is the greatest gift that the Republican Party could have. You have these people who just, 4 people, minor, they shouldn't be making the weather, but what a gift to the Republican Party the squad is. They will keep saying anti-American things, they will keep putting their feet in it, they'll keep riling up most of the country, and they will keep the Democratic Party being able to be portrayed as grabbed by them. Well, it's the same for the Republican Party. If the Republican Party doesn't address its own fetid corners, then the Democrats will have a legitimate way to say, look, you've got this big problem and you're only one step away, or so on. So there's no reason why, I don't need to insult the guy, but why the person you just mentioned's name should be on our lips. This is just, there are some people who are, for those of us who know history, there are some people who are simply doing the following intellectual trick. They're reheating a bit of Buchananism, they're reheating some David Irvingism, and they're doing it now, and they're getting away with it for a very specific historic reason, if I could just say what I think that is. They're getting away with it now for the first time from the right because of the fact that the generation of Holocaust survivors is basically died out. These people did not dare do this in the face of the immovable object of the survivors of the Shoah. But now, some people to the furthest fringes of the right are seeing the opportunity to do this. All we have to do on the right, you in the Republican Party, is to just hold the line that you all know you can hold and to say no. Nowhere near us. Nowhere near us. And it's not like it's hard. And the various characters who want to platform these people and think it's edgy and it's cool. There's nothing very edgy or cool about doing that on the right any more than there was on the left. How edgy and cool and admiring do we think of those far leftists who like to play with Castro and Mao and Stalin and all of that? Not at all. It's a rancid, fetid habit from the far left. Same thing with these guys with the right. And no, don't ask this person on and then just say you're just asking questions and give them softball interviews and come on. Anyhow, I don't know what's gone wrong with some of these people, but I don't think it's going to be hard to counter. As somebody mentioned earlier, I'm still pretty strong on the idea that being anti-Hitler remains mainstream.
So we'll finish up here with two questions. A quick one. You talked about the squad as being the gift that keeps on giving. What about, you're a New Yorker, you live in New York. What about Mamdani? Is that a gift that's going to keep on giving for the Republican Party? Or should we buy or sell New York real estate? What's your...
I mean, it's an amazing thing. I've written this in my column in the New York Post. It's pretty amazing to see Mamdani smarm his way into office, which is what it looks like he's going to do, evading every meaningful question. I'm sorry that so much of the opposition research has only just started to come out, but I mean, you know, as somebody mentioned earlier, you have somebody saying that the NYPD has its boot on the throat of New Yorkers and it's laced by the IDF, even before you get to that anti-Semitic far-left trope about everyone being trained by the IDF. What are you talking about the NYPD like that for? How dare you? These men and women who go into the most dangerous situations all the time, and you're talking about them as if they have their boots on the throats of New Yorkers? Good luck getting the respect of the police in New York after doing that kind of thing. But if he gets in, yes, I predict that he will be extremely useful to the Republican Party in campaigning. He'll be disastrous for those of us who live in New York. And he will, of course, be using it. Any time that the president or anyone else talks about him, he will use it to try to inflate himself and make himself waft up. Look, I mean, I don't think we've ever seen such a major city as New York run by a guy whose CV shows that he was a failed rapper, employed by his mum for a bit, and then mayor of New York. That's quite a
jump.
That's that's a heck of a CV.
Well,
Not been tried before. Yeah.
Let us end with a question about your reflections on what you've seen. You've spent an enormous amount of time in Israel. You've seen the tragedy of what's happened over the last couple years. You've also seen the stories of incredible courage and resilience. Tell us a story. Tell us about someone you encountered or some people you encountered along the way that shows the best of the Jewish people and the hope that we should all have.
Gosh, that's very hard because, as everyone here knows, I mean, Israel, particularly in the last few years, has been a country of just millions and millions of stories, all going on at the same time and at such a heat and passion. And I suppose I mentioned toward the end of the book, I think of a lot of people who I've met and spent time with in the last few years who've had a huge impact on me in lots and lots of different ways. I mentioned earlier the heroes of the IDF, and they can't be mentioned enough. It's extraordinary seeing them at work. I think when I was last here with you, I think we gathered here before the first anniversary of the 7th of October, and after that I was in. I mentioned this to somebody earlier. I was in Israel during Sukkot when the news came through that Sinwar had been killed in Rafah, and I went to Rafah the next day with the battalion who had killed him, and many extraordinary things from that. By the way, just two things, if I may. One is that some of you will know that that battalion, known as the Bizlach, young soldiers, and it seemed that, again, Ron might correct me on this or have information that I don't have, is very likely, but the young men who killed Sinwar and the men with him were not in uniform on October the 7th, 2023. And I think this is a remarkably powerful fact. Imagine that. This man, Sinwar, who said to the crowds in Gaza in 2018, go and invade and tear the hearts out of the Jews. He created not just the generation of Jews who rose up, but the person who sent him to his death. He made them. He created unwittingly the generation of heroes who saw him off. That is one of many stories. I just add another one quickly. For me, as well as the extraordinary men and women of the IDF, I think of all of the remarkable citizens of Israel who need to be mentioned as well. There was that unit, I mentioned this in my book, was unfortunate enough to have been involved in the incident where, you'll remember, 3 hostages were killed in Gaza in December 2023. And I relay in the book that the mother of one of those hostages sent a message to the men in the unit because she knew how down they would be on this, because many lives were ruined that day. And she said to them, I love you, I don't blame you, be strong. We need you to be strong. And the day after Sinwar was killed in Rafah, somebody from the unit played me the message they just got from the same mother, who said to them, you see, I told you, you had to be strong, and you did the job you needed to do, and you killed the enemy of Israel. Now this is a remarkable woman. And Israel, when it's been tested in the last couple of years, has been filled with just millions of remarkable stories. Can I finish on a slightly poetic note, but one that's been much on my mind? One of the blessings of my life in recent years is that I probably got more rabbis in my life than anyone has a right to have. And I probably go to synagogue more often than some of you. But I mention this only because I get to learn a lot from the exchanges I have the privilege of having in my life. And a few weeks ago, I was in Baltimore, and I was doing a fundraiser for the kibbutz near Oz, which is a kibbutz that was very badly attacked on the 7th of October, and they're rebuilding. And it's a wonderful thing to see, and anyone who can support them, please do. And we had 2 families who are going back to the kibbutz, and they're rebuilding. A young family, and also a family included an 80-year-old who had been taken hostage. He's going back to the community. Anyhow, I was talking with this man who was a former hostage and one of my rabbis, and we got talking about the Torah. And specifically, we mentioned the book of Ecclesiastes, which, as you all know, has a famous and resonant passage that to everything there is a season, a time for everything upon the earth. And the rabbi and I got talking about this thing that I've always noticed, which as a non-Jew has always struck me about the Jewish people, but particularly the Jewish state, which is the way in which sometimes everything feels like it's happening all at once. There was a family here who's had a bat mitzvah of their daughter last year in Israel, which I was at. And I remember it not just because of what a wonderful occasion it was, but because that morning I'd been to the funeral of some soldiers who'd been killed the day before. And I said to this rabbi, when we were talking about Ecclesiastes, isn't it extraordinary how in Israel in particular, all of this seems to go on at once? And he said, well, do you know Yehuda Amichai's poem about this? And can I just share a bit of this with you? Because this is something I've really learned from my time with the people of Israel. I just read you 2 verses. A man doesn't have time in his life to have time for everything. He doesn't have seasons enough to have a season for every purpose. Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A man needs to love and to hate at the same moment. to laugh and cry with the same eyes, with the same hands to throw stones and to gather them, to make love in war and war in love. When I think of Israel in the last few years, one of the many things I think is that they have been able to do, the citizens of Israel, all of these things at the same time, and to come through on the other side of it with the hostages home, and to be able to say, after all of this hatred inside the region, but also outside, to continue to say, Am Israel Chai.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Douglas Murray.